So John Mason and John Underhill were there. Me, Antonimo, and Uncas, they were there too. A man named Wequash, he was there also. John Mason, John Underhill, they had about 100 to 400 men, including Uncas, the first of the Mohegan, a turncoat Benedict. Of plants that are indigenous to America. You got vanilla, you got chocolate, you've got pineapple, you got tomato, you got potatoes, sweet potatoes, mashed potatoes, right? If you got potatoes, you could certainly mash them. The sweet potatoes were in South America, so actually during the 1621 feast, they wouldn't have been up here yet. Corn, maize, right? So corn, it's a major staple. Chili peppers, hot peppers, green bell peppers, pecans. Pecans were native to the Americas. Wild rice, passion fruit, peanuts, pumpkins, avocados, papaya, beans, squash, zucchini, berries, lots of different assorted nuts, acorns, chia, sunflowers, maple, cranberries too, but not the sauce, and tobacco. Tobacco is what built Jamestown. So that's all. These are things that were native to the Americas. Pecans, corn, tomato, potato, pineapples, chocolate, vanilla. The last of the Mohegans, Uncas. Uncas is the first of the Mohegans. And he made Sassacus the last of the Pequot because he's a turncoat Benedict Arnold of the Native Americans. Uncas and the Mohegans are the bad people in this story. They allied with John about 10 blocks away in Bessemer and South Pueblo near the 7-Eleven on Northern Avenue. The Pueblo County Coroner's Office identified Billy Ray Steiner, who's a 33-year-old man that was killed in a triple shooting that had happened last week or a couple days ago. And so Kenny Ryder, the Pueblo Police Department, said that they're leaning towards this being a homicide based on self-defense. So 29-year-old Demencio Villegas and 28-year-old Ernesto Villegas were both brothers. There was a noise complaint. There was a party at 900 block Lake Avenue on the city's southwest side. And then the officers were told by the residents they were going to go to sleep. They didn't go to sleep. So dude comes over and starts shooting to become a single colony. Then Captain John Underhill, this piece of shit, he worked for the Dutch and the English. They're in Gasset, Neantic. There's Captain Mason, Captain Underhill, Uncas, Mohegans. Some reason the Pequot and the Dutch have either created a bunch of enemies or the English were very good in creating a coalition to become a single colony. Then Captain John Underhill, this piece of shit, he worked for the Dutch and the English. I'm led to believe by KRDO News Channel 13 that Billy Ray Steiner, 33-year-old man, they called the police, told them to quiet down. Police goes over there. They say they're going to be quiet. They're not quiet. And so he goes over there with a gun, or he goes over there to confront them, and they're like, yeah, fuck you. And then he is like, well, what you think now? And then they're like, well, what you think? And now it's on, right? So apparently the way it sounds is that he goes over there, Billy Ray Steiner, the 33-year-old who gets shot and killed, and starts shooting at the brothers, Demencio and Ernesto Villegas. And then they returned fire and they killed him. Austin Perkins lived on Pueblo's southwest side for the past 10 years. It's like, it's the neighborhood, you know. Just he went out and said that it sounded like a hammer was hitting against his house, and he just wanted to make sure that the commotion wasn't in his yard. So he said it tripped him up. He woke up really fast, looked around to make sure there were John Mason's men, and you got John Underhill's men, and Underhill and Mason send 20 soldiers in, so they all start shooting, pow, pow, pow. And then 20 soldiers run in, and they breach the palisaded gates. So 10's coming in from one side, 10 is coming from in the other one. While this is all happening, while they were lining up on the bank, there was a dog that was barking. When they fired the shots and started rushing into the palisaded, fortified village of the Pequot, of Sassacus's people, you can hear Owanics. The Owanics are here. The Owanics are here. The Owanics are here. Everybody, the Owanics are here. Get up, pay attention, fight back. The Owanics are coming. The Owanics are here. 20 soldiers that were initially sent in were quickly overwhelmed to the point that they used, crazy how the smallest thing in the world can turn into a war. Helen of Troy caused the Trojan War. Then you had the Grasshopper War, which split up the Lenape and the Shawnee, traditionally called the Delaware, but they called themselves the Lenape, and the Shawnee used to be one tribe until a grasshopper, a little boy was playing with a grasshopper, and then the boy from the other tribe was like, "What do you got?" And then the boys started fighting, and then the kids started fighting, and then the mothers started fighting, and then all the fathers came home. They all started fighting, and then pretty soon they were all warring against each other. And then the Shawnee and the Lenape were no longer the same tribe anymore. Well, we're not going to be friends with you. Why? Because of that fucking grasshopper shit. So because of a grasshopper war, the Delaware and the Shawnee were no longer together. About Uncas and the Mohegans and the, not the Wampanoags, not the Poconet, not the Shawnee, not the Kispoto, but the Mohegans and the Pequot. The Pequot. So they were one, they're all Pequot, and then Uncas splits off with his Mohegan, and the Mohegans were the ones that were in favor of Underhill and the other one, Underhill and John Mason. And so the Mohegans and the Pequot split off. They used to be one tribe too, like the Delaware and the Shawnee, so they had a common ancestor. So that brings me up to Thanksgiving. The Mystick Massacre was a massacre and extermination and incineration, a genocide of the Pequot Native Americans. The Pequot will not survive. Their names will barely survive, and there are a few surviving today. Pequot. Thanksgiving is an Abraham Lincoln holiday. Abraham Lincoln, as soon as he puts his stamp of approval on it, Abraham Lincoln was the one that was passing out 160-acre tracts of land for anybody willing to sign an application and take care of it for 5 years. Abraham Lincoln's also the one that hung the 38 Sioux, and then he was president under John Chivington's Sand Creek Massacre of 1864. But Abraham Lincoln did something good here. He declared Thanksgiving. Apparently it was for the battles of Vicksburg and Gettysburg, and then just for the entire nation to heal, to, get unity and just be all that we can be. A lot of the southern states actually boycotted Thanksgiving because they believed it was an abolitionist plot. So essentially this was Abraham Lincoln's way of trying to get the message into the southern slaves that they were free and then they could go do as they please. The Confederates hating Thanksgiving should make you love this thing. Now, hemp was widely grown throughout the colonial America and at Spanish missions in the Southwest. So hemp, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, all these pilgrims, they were raising hemp along with lots of other things. In the early 1600s, it was a requirement. It was legally, you were legally obligated, legally mandated in Virginia, in Massachusetts, in Connecticut, in all those colonies. All the farmers had to grow hemp. Now, some people want to sit there and try to say that 1621 was a Thanksgiving, but they never declared Thanksgiving. There was no turkey there. There was no, basically you've been lied to your entire life because it wasn't the first Thanksgiving. Here's 3 Thanksgivings that was beforehand, and look at the 80 years before 1621 was 1541. And in 1541, there was a Thanksgiving in Canyon, Texas. So 80 years before William Bradford was shaken down by Chief Massasoit's 90 Wampanoag warriors, there was a Thanksgiving in Canyon, Texas. They served grapes and pecans. 1541. 1541. That is a while ago, is it not? 1541, that's like, what, Hernando Cortez? That's like before Cortez, wasn't it? Who was the guy that came up and went in the little thing? I don't know. But there was a Thanksgiving there in Canyon, Texas, 1541. They served grapes. They served pecans. And then we have a 1564 and a 1565 Thanksgiving, one with the French and one with the Spanish. Both of them, Timucua. So the Timucua Native Americans had served food, helped feed both the Spanish and the French. So in, let's go with 1564, you had the French, and so the French was there first, and there was corn, beans, squash, and pumpkins, which the Timucua farmed on a limited basis, as well as local fowl, oysters, shrimp, mullet, deer, and alligator. The Timucua preferred it smoked. Timucua, can that be it? Because I would like to say Timucua, 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 Timucua. So the Timucua, the group also enjoyed fresh cherries, blueberries, blackberries, mulberries, muscadine grapes, and fresh cherries, fresh blueberries, blackberries, mulberries. I don't even know where to get any of those right now today. Muscadine grapes. So they're having grapes and pecans in Canyon, Texas, 1541, 1564, in Jacksonville, Florida. They're having, shrimp, deer, mullets, alligators, and all these berries, grapes. Where the hell do they get grapes at? Anyways, so 56 years before 1621, before William Bradford was shaken down by Massasoit's 90 Wampanoag warriors in Florida, St. Augustine, September 8th, 1565, there was a Thanksgiving meal between the Spaniards and the Timucua. The Timucua and the Spaniards shared a meal September 8th, 1565. The Spanish, they brought cocido, which is a rich stew made with... So the Spanish brought cocido, C-O-C-I-D-O, cocido, a rich stew made with salted pork, garbanzo beans, saffron, cabbage, garlic, and onions, hard sea biscuits, and red wine. So wow, the Spanish, red wine, so apparently they knew where the damn grapes were, hard sea biscuits, rich stew made with salted pork, garbanzo beans, saffron, cabbage, garlic, and onions. That's what the Spanish brought. The Timucuans, they brought local game and fish, such as wild turkey, venison, alligator, bear, turtle, shark, mullet, sea catfish, tortoise, oysters, clams, along with grains, corn, beans, and squash. Grains, corn, beans, squash, alligator, bear, turtle, shark, mullet, oysters, clams, shark, bear. 37 is the year of the tulip mania, the Dutch tulip mania, when everybody went crazy over the tulips and there was a tulip bubble. Oh my God, we got to invest in these tulips. Look at these flowers. These flowers are gorgeous. The whole world is just going to buy these flowers. We've got to invest, and we've got to invest in them right now, immediately. 1637. It's a true story. Check it out. Tulip bubble. Tulip mania. Also in 1637, there was the Mystic River Massacre. 1637 is the year that the table knife was invented. So John Mason and John Underhill were there. Miantonimo and Uncas, they were there too. A man named Wequash, he was there also. John Mason, John Underhill, they had about 100 to 400 men, including Uncas, the first of the Mohegan, a turncoat Benedict. The last of the Mohegans, Uncas is the first of the Mohegans. And he made Sassacus the last of the Pequot, because he's a turncoat Benedict Arnold of the Native Americans. Uncas and the Mohegans are the bad people in this story. They allied with John Mason and John Underhill, the Narragansetts, the Mohegan, the people of the Wolf tribes. They allied with Mason and Underhill against the Pequot and the Dutch. 70 Mohegans were under the sachems Uncas and Wequash. 20 more men under Captain John Underhill joined him. John Mason at Fort Saybrook. Pequot Sachem Chief Warrior Sassacus, meanwhile, gathered a few hundred warriors and set out to make another raid on Hartford, Connecticut. That's Sassacus. At the same time, Captain Mason recruited more than 200 Narragansett and Neantic warriors. You know who John Mason is. So John Mason, he was born in England from Northamptonshire in 1600. He was elected to represent Dorchester in the Massachusetts General Court in 1634. He was the first American Naval Task Force pursued the pirate Dixie Bull, routing him from New England waters. He and Roger Ludlow planned and supervised the construction of the first fortifications on Castle Island, later known as Fort Independence. So he was living in Massachusetts Bay Colony, and then he was elected to represent Dorchester in the Massachusetts General Court, and then he had permission to move to the fertile Connecticut River Valley in 1634, 3 years before the Mystic River Massacre. In 1635, he settled in Windsor, Connecticut, at the confluence of the Farmington River and the Connecticut River. His Connecticut River Colony, simply the River Colony, was an English colony in North America. Eventually, it became the U.S. state of Connecticut. It was organized on March 3rd, 1636. So I wonder if the Connecticut River Colony being organized exactly 1 year before the Mystic River Massacre, I wonder if those two things are related. So the Connecticut River Colony was settled as a Puritan congregation. After early struggles with the Dutch, the English permanently gained control of the region in 1637. It's almost like it has nothing to do with the Pequot. It has everything to do with fighting for control of the region over fighting the Dutch. So Saybrook Colony and New Haven Colony would converge to the colony of Connecticut. New Haven was established 1662. Saybrook was. That's who John Mason was. John Mason was an early pilgrim. He was in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and then he got permission to go and colonize the Connecticut River Valley, which eventually became the Connecticut Colony. And then Connecticut Colony, they all combined with Windsor, Saybrook, Norwich, Saybrook and New Haven. Saybrook, New Haven were eventually consolidated into the colony of Connecticut. So Saybrook and New Haven would eventually become Connecticut. So that was what John Winthrop did. He consolidated the two. The settlements were on the Connecticut River, so he just combined them to become a single colony. Then Captain John Underhill, this piece of shit, he worked for the Dutch and the English. Check out John Underhill because he was, with the English. He's got an English name. He writes a book later on. He's a soldier in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, the province of New Hampshire, where he served as governor, the New Haven Colony, New Netherland, and later the province of New York, settling on Long Island. He was hired to train militia in New England. He is most noted for leading the colonial militia in the Pequot War and Keith's War, which the colonists mounted against two different groups of Native Americans, and he published an account of the Pequot War. So the Massachusetts Bay Colony, right? Underhill represents the Massachusetts Bay Colony and New Haven Colony, so Connecticut Colony, just like John Mason represents the Massachusetts Bay Colony as well, and the Connecticut colonies, the New Haven and the Saybrook colonies. So Keith's War, the Dutch, what's he fighting with the Dutch? Narragansett, Niantic, there's Captain Mason, Captain Underhill, Uncas, Mohegans. Some reason the Pequot and the Dutch have either created a bunch of enemies or the English were very good in creating a coalition, because all of them are outside of Sassacus's home, or his people's home, where the children and the elderly and the women would sleep. So Sassacus had two main forts, but he was out with several hundred warriors, ready to make a raid on Hartford, Connecticut. Now, Sassacus could have burnt Hartford, Connecticut down to the ground and killed all the inhabitants, like what's going to happen in Mystic River Massacre, and they were afraid of Sassacus's spirit when they were burning down his children. May 10th, 1637, John Mason with 90 colonists and 60 Mohegans under Uncas left Hartford to attack Sassacus's Pequot Harbor Fort. On May 15th, Mason and Uncas arrived at Fort Saybrook with their troops. John Underhill had 19 men at the fort. Uncas led 40 men to battle against the Pequot and the Niantic, killing 4 to 7 on May 18th. So some Niantic were on the side of the Pequot. There was western and eastern Niantic. May 18th, Mason and Underhill's forces left for Narragansett territory and arrived on May 20th. The Narragansett under Miantanamo and the Eastern Neantic under Ninigret confirmed their allegiance to John Mason and John Underhill. On May 25th, John Miantanamo, Ninigret, John Mason, John Underhill, Uncas, they approached Sassacus's Pequot Harbor Fort on May 25th, but they decided to attack the fort at Mystick instead. Various reasons for this change of plan have been suggested, ranging from its closer location to a deliberate attempt to avoid a battle and instead have a massacre. They arrived and camped at Mystick River at night. The English ships pretended to leave. They thought this would trick the Native Americans. John Mason, John Underhill, Uncas, Miantanamo, they didn't want to fight the Pequot offspring of Sassacus directly, face to face, man to man. Instead, they strategically, geniusly, right, the way the history books write, chose terrorism, straight up fucking terrorists. So John Mason and John Underhill are fucking terrorists. The Underhill, the captains of Mason, the maps, let's see, Captain Mason, Captain Underhill of the Connecticut colony and Massachusetts Bay colony, these private corporations looking to profit from the New World adventure instead of govern and try to create a civilization. These pilgrims were terrorists. They killed these children and women and these old people at the Mystick River Massacre of 1637 for political reasons. That's terrorism. When you kill innocent civilians for political reasons, that's terrorism. So John Mason, he thought he was clever, right? He's going to attack the elderly men and women and all the women of Sassacus and their children in their sleep, because that would be a much better prospect than taking on grown-ass warriors. Sassacus and all his warriors, taking them on head-on. Native American warriors, like a civil war. 1637 happens. This day is going to live in infamy. It's going to change the balance of power in America forever. On May 26, 1637, John Mason and Underhill and company fired a volley at dawn. They just started shooting, and then they rushed into the fort. You had John Mason at the northeast and John Underhill at the southwest. There's only two entrances to this palisaded fort anyways. This palisaded fort out in the middle of nowhere that they were able to track down. The Mystick River Massacre started in the pre-dawn hours of May 26, 1637, when English forces led by Captains John Mason and John Underhill, along with their Indian allies from the Mohegan and Narragansett tribes, surrounded one of the two main fortified Pequot villages at Mystick. 20 soldiers, John Mason's men, and you got John Underhill's men, and Underhill and Mason send 20 soldiers in, so they all start shooting, pow, pow, pow. And then 20 soldiers run in, and they breach the palisaded gates. So 10's coming in from one side, 10 is coming from in the other one. While this is all happening, while they were lining up on the bank, there was a dog that was barking. When they fired the shots and started rushing into the palisaded, fortified village of the Pequot, of Sassacus's people, you could hear Owanics. The Owanics are here. The Owanics are here. The Owanics are here. Everybody, the Owanics are here. Get up, pay attention, fight back. The Owanics are coming. The Owanics are here. 20 soldiers that were initially sent in were quickly overwhelmed to the point that they used gassets, were so alarmed by the fact that this was Sassacus's fort. This was not his main fort. This wasn't his port, but it was his other one. There was two main Pequot villages. And the Narragansetts were the traditional enemies, or they had fought the Pequot before. They were so scared, they were so petrified when they were invading. And actually the Narragansetts stayed back and they watched Mason and Underhill do most of it, and then they would get the stragglers. They fell back in terror, though. They didn't go in. They didn't lead. They didn't go in with the attack. They said, oh, my God, Sassacus. He's in there. He's in the fort. Sassacus is there. Sassacus, the god the one God. Nobody can kill Sassacus the god. And so they stayed back. When John Mason found that the battle wasn't going his way, Mason and John Underhill thought it would be a much easier capture than what it actually was. So you had 400 to 700 women, children, and old folks in the Mystick River fort. And so the 20 soldiers weren't able to subdue the entire village. They started getting scared. They started getting worried about it because it wasn't going their way. So John Mason said, we've got to burn them all. So I think John Mason probably saw some go down. And John Mason and company decided to set fire to 80 huts that was housing approximately 4, 5, 6, 7, 800 people. 80 huts, maybe 800 people, maybe 400. So the point for John Mason and John Underhill, they didn't just want to win militarily. They wanted to break them psychologically. They wanted to wipe out the Pequot. This was a genocide. They weren't just trying to conquer them militarily and subdue them. They wanted them dead. Just a straight-up genocide. It was a cultural genocide, too. The massacre, the sleeping village of 500 non-warriors, they roasted them like marshmallows, and then when they tried to get out, they would shoot them and kill them, too. 1/3 of the Pequot was wiped out on May 26, 1637. 1/3 of them wiped out in one night. And they started to roast the children in their sleeps in the fires they set upon their houses. These pilgrims, so clever, they're so smart, right? If you just burn children in their sleep, that's so much easier than to attack warriors head on. And if the children tried to escape, they would shoot them with their guns to make sure all the Pequot Native Americans were dead forever and ever. John Mason later declared that the attack against the Pequots was the act of a God who laughed at his enemies and the enemies of his people to scorn, making the Pequot fort as a fiery oven. Thus did the Lord judge among the heathen, filling Mystick with dead bodies. Of the estimated 500 Pequot present at Mystick River Fort that day, only 7 survived to be taken prisoner, while another 7 escaped into the woods. So out of 400 to 800 folks, only 7 were prisoners and the other 7 lived. That's a massacre. That's a genocide. That's a one-sided asymmetrical warfare that Hitler would have loved and actually emulated. He loved how the Anglo-Saxons wiped out the Native American. He loved it. It was awesome how they did. They didn't just kill them, just in their faces, but then wiped them out of history. 600 to 700 Pequot died within an hour. 7 were taken captive, 7 escaped, and that's according to Mason's eyewitness account. This is just a little more than 1 hour. 500 or 600 of these barbarians were dismissed from a world that was burdened with them. It may be demanded, should not Christians have more mercy and compassion? But sometimes the scripture declareth women and children must perish with their parents. We have sufficient light from the word of God for our proceedings. And it said that this is Puritan, Divine, Cotton Mather, Magnalia, Christi Americana. But I've also heard that it was Bradford or Winthrop or Mason or one of the other guys. We had sufficient light from the word of God for our proceedings. 2 Englishmen were killed and 20 to 40 were wounded. That's how many they would admit. 2 Englishmen were killed. And of course it's Englishmen now that we conquered the British, but these are the British, right? There was no America in the 1600s. Captain John Underhill justified the killing of elderly women. John Underhill's a piece of shit. He's going to kill more Native Americans and have more of these Native American excursions, not with just the British, but also with the Dutch. But he justified it, and it's got the same quote. He justified the killing of the elderly, of women, of children. Sometimes the scripture declareth women and children must perish with their parents. We had sufficient light from the word of God for our proceedings. The English marched toward their ships, burning Pequot dwellings along the way. The effect of the Pequot War was profound. Overnight, the balance of power had shifted from the populous but unorganized natives to the English colonies. Henceforth, until King Philip's War, there would be no combination of Indian tribes that could seriously threaten the British. The destruction of the Pequot cleared away the only major obstacle to Puritan expansion, and the thoroughness of that destruction made a deep impression on the other tribes. Scared the Of plants that are indigenous to America, you got vanilla, you got chocolate, you've got pineapple, you got tomato, you got potatoes, sweet potatoes, mashed potatoes, right? If you got potatoes, you could certainly mash them. The sweet potatoes were in South America, so actually during the 1621 feast, they wouldn't have been up here yet. Corn, maize, right? So corn, it's a major staple. Chili peppers, hot peppers, green bell peppers, pecans. Pecans were native to the Americas. Wild rice, passion fruit, peanuts, pumpkins, avocados, papaya, beans, squash, zucchini, berries, lots of different assorted nuts, acorns, chia, sunflowers, maple, cranberries too, but not the sauce, and tobacco. Tobacco is what built Jamestown. So that's all. These are things that were native to the Americas. Pecans, corn, tomato, potato, pineapples, chocolate, vanilla. Major species of vanilla currently are grown globally, all of which derive from a species originally found in Mesoamerica, including modern-day Mexico. So vanilla, the vanilla bean, which is, I think it's black, the vine is black. Pre-Columbian Mesoamerican people cultivated the vine of the vanilla orchid called the Tlaxcaltecutl. It's so many X's and T's and L's. But the Aztecs used vanilla. Spanish conquistador Hernan Cortez is credited with introducing both vanilla and chocolate to Europe in the 1520s. Vanilla is the second most expensive spice after saffron today because growing the vanilla seed pods is labor intensive. So vanilla, very important. That's why pure vanilla extract is so much more expensive than that imitation shit. Albius in 1841 was a slave who lived on the French island of Reunion in the Indian Ocean, discovered at the age of 12 that the vanilla plant, the vanilla bean plant, whatever it's called, right, the vanilla orchid could be hand pollinated. So this is a slave, Edmund Albius, on the French island of Reunion, which is next to Madagascar, when he was 12 years old. Figured that you can hand pollinate these vanilla plants, and then that hand pollination allowed global cultivation of the plant. Now, it's not just vanilla that they increased, made a better industry, the slaves. It was also pecans. There was a slave that made pecans much better. And Antone, his name was Antone, and he 1876 is when Antone's clone, the Centennial pecan tree, becomes famous. So that's 1871. And then 1841 was when Edmund Albius, who was also an African-American slave who had made the industry, the vanilla bean, the vanilla orchid industry, that much more stronger.